Welcome to a slightly larger glimpse of my bedroom. It's been a long week. And by long week, I mean it's only Wednesday and I don't know who I am or what I'm doing. I went camping this weekend and read a rather charming book. Actually, I haven't finished it. I'm only halfway through. But for very little reading, that's a decent way through the book. It's called The Woman in the Alcove. I don't actually know where it is. I seem to have lost it since I got home. It is a book that was published in 1903, and so far, the gist of the book is that it is from the perspective of a young woman, fairly wealthy, but a young woman for whom the prospect of marriage did not seem very high. She was very amenable to the idea, very agreeable indeed, but nobody was interested, or so she thought. In the first few pages, we are introduced to said young woman, whose name I'm not sure we've ever been given, and if we have, it has since slipped my mind. She describes herself as small and plain and boring and rather envious of the beautiful, flirtatious women at the party. Oh yeah, did I mention that we were at a party? Who capture the attention of all of the eligible and elegant young men whose heart is immediately captured by their gaze. Okay, I'm just being ridiculous now, but someone gets murdered. And the story continues with her trying to figure out what the heck happened. And it's surprisingly feminist for a book from 1903. I mean, we have a girl who, yes, she does want to get married, which, that's great. I mean, I want to get married. But she's going into nursing, and she wants to go into nursing. It's not like she laments the fact that she has to go into nursing or that she has to go into nursing. She is actually quite looks forward to it. And then she ends up being rather outspoken about her thoughts on the murder. You know what? Nobody is gonna read this book, so I'll just give you all the spoilers. Her lover, the man who suddenly proposed to her at a party, the man who she was in love with but thought, you know, he could never be attracted to me, has this seriously been a trope since 1903, probably beforehand. Let's be honest. So her lover, Mr. Durant, I think is his name, was accused of committing said crime. They're not exactly certain the reasons that he might have been motivated to commit said crime, but he was the last person to be seen with her, the woman who was murdered, and you know, he was fairly respected, but not many people liked him, so why not pin it on him, you know? Well, our intrepid heroine is seized by the belief that he's absolutely not the one who did it. Partially because, you know, she's in love with him, and partially because the evidence just doesn't quite add up. So she goes to the inspector or officer. I think they called him the inspector. It's the person who was doing the brunt of the investigation, and she lays out her opinions, her thoughts on the matter, and they devise a plan to get the information that they need. So by way of her nursing degree, her, you know, this career that she was intending to go into before she was proposed to, she gets a job at the home of the person that she suspects of committing the crime. He has a very sweet, very ill daughter. She feels really bad about, trying to out her father as the murderer, but, she also has a lover who has been arrested for the murder that she thinks he hasn't done. So she's like, I priorities here. I'm gonna choose my man. Sorry to my sister, but man. And that's about as far as I've gotten. I think I'm going to finish the book and continue with my, synopsis, with my conversation about it, but I just found it very fascinating. I've not read a whole bunch of books from that time period that were as I said, kind of feminists. She definitely still stayed within societal structures, and she was not out here, going sleeveless and showing off her ankles or anything. She's a fine ankle indeed. Beautiful. Anyways, and yeah, it's very interesting the way that they go about the book from her perspective. I really enjoyed it so far. I love the writing. It's very much old-fashioned. I was a huge fan of LMM, or Lucy Maud Montgomery, the author of the Anne of Green Gables books. All of her, Jane of Lantern Hill, Emily of New Moon, you get the idea. So I have a decent amount of experience with this sort of antiquated language that they use, and I'm realizing that I've really missed that style of writing, and I think I need to find more antique and just generally not pretentious, because they weren't trying to be pretentious, that's just the way they talked, but more intelligent language. For someone who read the dictionary for fun as a child because I had nothing better to do, you'd think that I would use more big words, but alas, I am not such a show-off as I used to be, and also I have gotten much lazier in my old age, at the ripe old age of 19. So that is my thoughts. I think I may try and find Jane of Lantern Hill at my local library and maybe do a review of it. I think it would be interesting to go through the book and maybe even sort of look through, the difference between books written in the early 1900s, late 1800s versus, the 2020s. There's, just like fashion, there's things are always changing, but I wonder, what things we have kept and what things we've discarded, and just generally, how we've evolved as a society. It's always been very interesting to me. I was obsessed with the Lauren Gills Wilder books as a child, which I now realize they are slightly problematic. I still I understand that was the time period that they were from, but I also think that they shouldn't really be a role model placement for young children like they were for me. And I am grateful that I have grown up and, realized that's not how you treat Native Americans, and just generally, women, all of the above. So yeah, I was very obsessed with antique vintage fashion. My favorite eras are 1950s, or the 18 and 1950s. So the two, you know, yeah, I don't know. I love the I love the femininity and a lot of the structure of the clothing. I mean, I feel like the 30s and 40s were a little softer, a little more, you know, almost hippie-ish, like not hippie-ish in the least. I do know what I'm talking about, sort of. But they were just a little bit softer and a little bit less structured than the 50s. I'm gonna stop talking now. The 1850s, however, oh, I mean, just the 1800s is such. I mean, you go from the early 1800s with, you know, super high waisted. Why did I do that? Super high waisted dresses, and the waists slowly get lower, and the skirts get bigger throughout the decade, or throughout the century. Decade. And, you know, in the 50s, you have these like perfectly sphere like skirts. You know, they're very bell shaped, very large, fairly bright colors, at least for the people that could afford them. Hoop skirts, petticoats, you know, chemise, all of it. And then you move to the 60s where they start moving a little bit towards the back. They're still very bell shaped, very large, but they start becoming a little flatter on the front and more round around the back. And then you get to the 80s and 90s, and they have these tiny little skirts that were fairly restrictive to walk in. I don't know how restrictive. It's been a long time since I've done any research on the subject. And then you have the ridiculous little poofs on the back. And just, I love thinking about the impact that fashion has on culture and that culture has on fashion. I mean, I feel like it's kind of a chicken and the egg sort of situation. You know, is clothing this way because society is this way? Or is society this way because clothing is this way? And how does fashion reflect, you know, the values, the boundaries, just the societal expectations of the time? I mean, even now, I'm sure there could be so much to discuss about that, but I am not equipped for that discussion right now. So I am going to say goodbye and say goodbye. Thank you for making it all the way through this. It's currently 15 minutes long, but it'll probably end up more like 7 to 10 minutes long, because there will be a lot of stuff that I edit out, because I do a lot of rambling and a lot of sighing and staring off into the distance and laughing at myself. But yeah, if you've made us this far, don't do anything, because my content really isn't worth liking and subscribing, and yet maybe never will be. But, you know, I mean, if you really like my face that much, go ahead. You don't gotta do anything, but, you know, if you want to show back up, that's cool. I mean, I ain't on here for the popularity. I'm just on here because I'm not totally sure why I'm on YouTube. I just am. It's a learning curve. This is character growth. The fact that I am even able to sit in front of a camera and talk is huge, so we take that as a win. Now I say goodbye again. And this time I mean it.